Rock history isn't written only in albums and sold-out arenas. Some of its most enduring legends were born far from the stage lights behind closed doors. In dressing rooms and hotel corridors, these stories were never confirmed, rarely denied, and almost always wrapped in silence. Whispers replaced facts, euphemisms replaced names, and mystery became part of the myth. This isn't a list of confessions. It's a look at how ambiguity itself helped shape the most. Talked about figures in classic rock history, Mick Jagger as the face of the Rolling Stones. Mick Jagger became one of rock history's most discussed figures, both on and off stage. During the height of their touring years, Jagger's backstage life became nearly as legendary as the music itself. Numerous crew members and insiders from those Stones tours have described how Jagger seemed to enter an entirely different world once he stepped off stage. The revolving door of his private dressing room became the stuff of legend, with whispers of encounters that would last until dawn and beyond. These relationships were never officially confirmed, and names were rarely, if ever, spoken aloud. Jagger himself has always been masterfully evasive on the subject, neither denying nor confirming anything. What filtered through to the press typically came in carefully vague phrases, very close connections, conversations that lasted all night, and comings and goings from private rooms. While such rumors were fairly standard for rock stars of that era, Jagger's name seemed to resurface with remarkable consistency on every single tour. To this day, the reason the Stones' backstage life remains as much a topic of conversation as their music is, precisely because of this calculated silence. Jagger understood that mystery was more powerful than revelation. Gene Simmons stands as one of the rare figures in rock who has spoken about backstage life without romanticizing it. Yet, what's fascinating is his approach. He's said plenty, but never named names. The stories from Kiss tours became the foundation of backstage legend over decades. In countless interviews, he would reference the rock star lifestyle in broad strokes, but never descended into specifics. This strategic ambiguity only amplified the rumors rather than dampening them. Backstage VIP areas, exclusive access passes, and the infamous post-show parties became inseparable from the Kiss brand itself. Simmons' strategy was transparent in its execution. Keep the narrative alive, but never leave evidence. He would hint at numbers, suggest wild scenarios, and paint pictures with words while remaining frustratingly vague about actual incidents. This made him the poster child for rock icons who imply, without confessing, the Kiss Army knew the legends, the media perpetuated them, and Simmons simply smiled knowingly whenever the subject arose. His autobiography hinted at much, but confirmed little. Maintaining the perfect balance between revelation and discretion, Zeppelin's tours are remembered not just for their groundbreaking music, but for the backstage whispers that followed the band from city to city. Jimmy Page stood at the center of these rumors. Entire hotel floors would be booked. Long nights stretched into early mornings. And what happened behind closed doors circulated through rock journalism as whispers for years. Page chose absolute silence on these matters. Neither his authorized biographies nor his rare interviews contained any clear statements addressing these stories. This silence created an almost mythological aura around him, transforming him from mere guitarist into an enigmatic figure shrouded in mystery. Led Zeppelin's untouchable image was significantly strengthened by this backstage mystique. The band's infamous Riot House days at the Continental Hyatt became the stuff of legend, with Page at the center of the most persistent tales. Even today, when Page's name comes up, people remember not just his guitar genius, but also the untold stories that remain deliberately unspoken. This calculated discretion has preserved his mystique across 5 decades. Steven Tyler was as open on stage as he was closed off about backstage matters. During Aerosmith's touring years, much was written about Tyler's private life behind the curtain, but very little came directly from him. The press of that era typically employed euphemisms, nights that spiraled out of control, and parties that saw the sunrise. Tyler never drew a clear line against these narratives. He neither fully denied nor explicitly confirmed them, preferring to exist in a gray area that allowed the rumors to persist indefinitely. This ambiguity served him well through Aerosmith's various periods of collapse and resurrection. Even during interviews discussing the band's well-documented struggles with substances, Tyler would dance around the more salacious backstage stories. His autobiography offered glimpses and confessions about certain aspects of his life, but the specifics of many rumored encounters remained firmly behind the veil. This selective transparency allowed him to control his narrative, while keeping the most controversial elements perpetually shrouded in mystery. The result is a legacy where his music and his mystique are forever intertwined. David Lee Roth, during his Van Halen years, was the living embodiment of the rock star stereotype. The confidence and uncontrolled energy visible on stage continued full force backstage. Stories about Roth typically centered on relationships that burned too bright and too fast. However, Roth has never treated these subjects with any seriousness. In interviews, he would deflect with humor, change the subject entirely, or deploy exaggerated comedy to avoid giving straight answers. This approach made it impossible to discern where truth ended and showmanship began. He would tell outrageous stories that might be true, might be embellished, or might be complete fiction, and that was precisely the point. Roth understood that the rock star persona required an element of unverifiable excess. His autobiography was filled with anecdotes that entertained without truly revealing. Today, his name is associated equally with musical innovation and backstage chaos. With both elements feeding into the Diamond Dave mythology, he remains the consummate showman. Even when discussing his private life, Rod Stewart's stage image was romantic. But backstage rumors didn't always align with this carefully crafted persona. During his peak touring years, Stewart's name frequently surfaced in connection with discreet relationships. However, he managed to keep his private life remarkably separate from public scrutiny. What reached the press was typically indirect and circumstantial. There were no photographs, no explicit statements, just moments where he was seen in very close proximity to various individuals. The lack of concrete evidence, combined with Stewart's refusal to address these whispers, directly made him one of rock's quietly discussed figures. His ability to maintain this privacy in an era before social media and smartphones was remarkable. Stewart projected an image of the romantic crooner while keeping actual romantic entanglements carefully guarded. Even his later marriages and public relationships seemed separate from the touring life that generated so many quiet rumors. This discretion has allowed him to maintain a respectable public image, while the whispers of his touring days remain just that. Axl Rose's backstage existence was as turbulent as his onstage persona. Tours crises, backstage fights, and sudden outbursts fed directly into rumors about his private life during those years. Axl typically chose complete silence on these matters, letting his actions speak louder than any words. What leaked to the press usually came from sources close to the situation rather than anyone directly involved. These never-official stories became part of Guns N' Roses' chaotic brand. The band's reputation for unpredictability extended beyond late starts and canceled shows into whispered tales of what happened behind closed doors. Axl's relationship with the media was already famously antagonistic, which meant he had no interest in clarifying or denying backstage rumors. His silence on these matters was less strategic calculation and more outright dismissal of public curiosity. This approach left a vacuum that gossip readily filled, creating legends that have persisted. For over 3 decades, despite a lack of concrete confirmation, Robert Plant was dubbed Led Zeppelin's Golden God, but he consistently kept his private life behind the curtain. Throughout the touring years, numerous rumors circulated about Plant, yet he chose never to engage with these topics. In interviews, he focused relentlessly on the music, completely ignoring questions about backstage life. This conscious silence had the paradoxical effect of making the rumors more permanent rather than allowing them to fade. Plant's refusal to address these stories gave them an immortality they might not have otherwise achieved. His post-Zeppelin career maintained this same careful boundary between public artistry and private life. Even in retrospective interviews about the Zeppelin era, Plant consistently steered conversations toward musical collaboration and creative process, deflecting anything that ventured into backstage territory. This discipline in maintaining privacy has allowed him to preserve both his dignity and his mystique across a career spanning more than 5 decades. Bono's public image has always been meticulously controlled, centered on family, fidelity, and social responsibility. Yet during U2's extensive tours, backstage whispers about Bono were never entirely absent. What's particularly interesting is that these rumors never gained traction in mainstream media. Bono's absolute silence on such matters neither confirmed nor dispelled these claims. His carefully constructed image as rock's moral conscience created a protective barrier that few journalists were willing to breach. The contrast between his public persona and the quiet backstage rumors created a cognitive dissonance that most observers simply chose to ignore. Unlike other rock stars who leaned into their rebellious images, Bono's brand required cleaner lines. This made any deviation from his established narrative more carefully guarded, whether through excellent management, media relationships, or simply the benefit of doubt his humanitarian work afforded him. Bono successfully navigated decades of touring while keeping backstage, life completely separate from his public image. Eric Clapton's private life has been as complex as his musical journey. Throughout rock history, his name has frequently been linked with emotional entanglements and complicated relationships that occasionally became public. However, Clapton typically addressed these topics only superficially when pressed. He avoided details and never named names unless absolutely unavoidable. This reluctance to elaborate meant that much of what happened backstage during his touring years remains deliberately unclear. His autobiography offered some insights, but maintained careful boundaries about what would and wouldn't be discussed. The stories that did emerge, often from others rather than Clapton himself, painted a picture of someone whose romantic life was as turbulent as his well-documented personal struggles. Yet Clapton maintained enough discretion that specific encounters and relationships from his touring years remain largely unknown to the public, preserved in the memories of those who were there but never fully revealed to history. Decades later, the music remains immortal, but so do the questions. What truly happened backstage will likely never be fully known, and that may be exactly how these artists wanted it. In an era before smartphones, social media, and constant surveillance, mystery was currency. Some guarded it fiercely, others teased it endlessly, but all of them understood one truth: legends grow strongest in the absence of answers. As time passes, the stories fade into myth, the myths into history, and the silence becomes part of the legacy itself. In the end, classic rock wasn't just about what was played on stage, it was about what was never said after the final encore.